Alright, you guys, what is good? We are back with another podcast. So today we are in my studio. I wanted to change things up a little bit. Get out of my office. The weather's getting a little bit better here. Figured it'd be a good reason to get outside, and not that we're obviously not outside right now, but just a reason to be out of the house. So yeah, here we are. Welcome to an area that's not the office. So today I wanted to talk about wedding photography. I feel like it's a pretty relevant thing right now. I mean, at least here in the Northeast and in the northern parts of America, it's beginning to get warmer. And with that comes, pretty much more weddings. I'm sure some of you that do shoot weddings have already begun to, maybe even photograph them, or, you're prepping for them. I know me, I probably have 20 to 25 between the months of April through November. I don't know the exact number, something between that. But anyways, with that being said, with wedding season being here, and things, really gonna start taking off here with weddings, I wanted to talk about wedding photography. I wanted to talk about how I got into it, what my first wedding was like, the gear that I use, how I think you can get into it, and try and give as brief of an overview in 20 minutes or less as far as my overall experience and things I think about it. So to start, the way I got into wedding photography, I think it was via Craigslist, which is kind of corny, really sketchy, but that's how it happened. I think I've literally just applied to a ad that a Baltimore wedding photographer had out, and it was in Federal Hill, which those of you that know anything about Baltimore know that that's a nicer area, at least in my experience in Baltimore. Great wedding. Everybody was cool. For me, it was just as simple as, she really did take a chance on me. That person being the wedding photographer. They hired me as a second shooter. I had no previous experience, but they liked my portrait work, so that kind of carried over. It was getting ready shots, ceremony, reception, the full process. It was a good experience. The main photographer, she had no problems with what I shot. Fortunately for me, it went, real smooth. Everybody was cool. And it was a pretty non-painful, from a mental aspect. It was a pretty non-painful experience. I would say I got lucky and didn't have any mishaps or anything. And that was my first wedding, and I feel that it was like I said, I feel like it was a great transition to picking up weddings, and I'm thankful for that opportunity. And then essentially from that wedding, what I did was I started picking up, I used that essentially from that I developed a portfolio, and then from that is when I started trying to apply to various wedding companies, to be a subcontractor for different wedding companies. And then from there it just ballooned to what it is now, which is me first shooting like 20 to 25 weddings. What it's like shooting weddings, everybody's going to tell you that has the potential to be very financially rewarding, which that's what everybody wants to hear. So I feel like that's kind of the easy way out when it comes to explaining weddings. Like, oh, it's where the money's at. And of course, it's weddings. Everybody knows weddings are expensive. There is a lot of money to be had, but there's also a lot of stress, a lot of planning, a lot of attentiveness. There's a lot of discussion and pre-planning and all those things that are involved, that you might go and make $2,000-$3,000 photographing a wedding, but in more cases than not, you're hustling your ass off for that $2,000 or $3,000. And one of the things that always gives me a small level of anxiety with every wedding is going into every wedding just knowing that you have one shot. Like, you don't have do-overs with weddings. If you mess something up and miss something, you can't go back 3 days later and redo it over like you can with a portrait shoot or a product shoot or something of that nature. You have one time to get it right, and you better get that shit right, or you're gonna have family, friends, the bride, the groom, everybody that was relevant to that wedding. You're gonna have them on your ass. So you better basically second shoot quite a lot before you start first shooting. That would be literally, even a couple dozen. Do a couple dozen weddings as a second shooter before you start first shooting. That would definitely be my suggestion. And before I do weddings, one thing that I feel you can do to really help yourself out and help things be more fluid is typically there's 3 things that I typically ask for when it comes to preparing for weddings. One is the itinerary, because everybody needs that. You need to know how the day is laid out, when things are happening. Everybody does things different. Some people don't have cakes. Some people do garter tosses. Some don't. Some people don't care about getting ready photos at all. Some do. So the itinerary. Another thing that I like to do is have the bride and groom create a mood board, whether that be just via sending things over like through email, a Pinterest board, or any other type of mood board creating storyboard app, and that allows me to see what they prefer as far as posing. Oftentimes in these mood boards, they'll send photos of their venue, and obviously knowing what the venue is and its layout beforehand is very crucial in preparing. And it also gives me an idea of what editing styles they like, whether it's what's very popular right now is dark and moody and warm. Some people like bright and airy. Some people, they just want a basic contrast, clarity adjustments, exposure. They want to keep things real natural. So those are all things that a mood board help out with. And then finally, a group list, and this is crucial when doing bridal party shots, and it's crucial during family shots, because if you're a first shooter and you have a second shooter, what I do is I typically have just a list printed out, and I'll have my second shooter read down that list one after another and get one after another all the different shot variations that this bride and groom sent me, and we'll just go down it one after another and that makes things so much more fluid when getting family and bridal party shots, and making sure that I get what they want, and being able to just check one off after another. And what I feel like besides just getting what the bride and groom want to get, because obviously they're listing it, and that's why they're listing it, is because they want to get that. But it also just allows you to just in black and white go one off after the other, because if you're not having that list, that means you're typically thinking things up on the spot, and that takes time, and that wastes time at a wedding where time is already short and time is, already stretched oftentimes to begin with. So now you don't even need to think, it's just on autopilot, one after another. So those three things, the itinerary, example shots, and the group list, are three things that I find crucial and I ask for every single time. So to go on even further and explain the timeline of how a wedding works, and when some of these group lists and group shots, family shots, and things like that come into play, is typically a wedding will start out with your getting ready shots. Some people don't care about it, some do. I'd say probably 75% of the ones that I do, they do care about that. And it starts off with that. Oftentimes that will last maybe about 2 hours. With me being a male, I often hire female second shooters, because brides will often not want a male in with them getting ready. So I will typically hire female second shooters. I feel like it just, it takes that aspect out of it, and not having to ask, and just saying like, hey, my second shooter's female, I'm gonna have her in with you while you get ready and taking those shots of you. I'm more than comfortable in being in with a bride, but more times than not, they're not comfortable with me being in there. So that's why I do that. And then after that, a lot of times will come first look, and that is, basically the groom seeing the bride for the first time prior to the wedding. Some people don't do that, and some people prefer to, literally just see each other for the first time as they're walking down the aisle, and that's fine too. And then after that, a lot of times will come bridal shots. Everybody will get together, we'll get shots of the bride and groom, we'll get shots of, the girls, the guys, the whole party together. And then that typically leads into the ceremony, which then, depending on whether it's a Catholic, Christian, non-religious wedding, maybe Middle Eastern of some sorts, they all have their different way that they go about things. Sometimes it can be as simple as 15 minutes. Sometimes it can be as long as an hour. And then after that is a lot of times cocktail hour. And then that typically turns into getting photos of the family, and then from that's the reception, which that's a whole mixture of things: garter toss, cake cutting, dancing, maybe there's they call it the money dance. You basically pay money to dance with the bride and groom. There's a lot of different things that can happen during a reception. It varies. Every wedding's different. There's so many different things that people consider and people like to do. Some don't like to do. So there's really no, industry standard when it comes to how a wedding is planned or laid out. But those are some of the big things that happen. Those are some of the things to keep in mind. The next thing I wanted to talk about is gear. And this is just what I use. So the gear that I use is, I shoot with Nikon mirrorless these days. So I'm shooting with Nikon mirrorless as my main body. On that, I typically have a 24-70. A lot of wedding photographers will agree that a 24-70 is pretty much the holy grail when it comes to wedding photography. Beyond that, my second body is a good old crafty Nikon DSLR, specifically a D610. It's just a good, efficient body. You can't go wrong. They're cheap. I mean, you can probably get them for like 600 used these days. And then on that, typically I'll either have a prime with some type of 1.4, 1.8, and the 24-70 on my Z6. That will be my, general all-purpose lens, and then if I'm using a prime on my D610, that'll be a lot of times I'll use that for decor shots or shots of various objects, things like rings, stuff like that I really want to emphasize bokeh. And I also use a dual camera strap. That thing is a game changer. I actually have a video on my YouTube account that I talked about this previously, and I think it might have been episode 2 of this podcast where I talked about that briefly. I would highly recommend getting one of those. Those things are incredible. It's so efficient. It helps you out so much. I do also bring off-camera flashes. I use one on camera that a lot of times I'll bounce flash off. Like if I'm at a wedding that has white ceilings or white walls, it's a blessing. So I'll have a camera and a flash on camera that I'll use to bounce, and that's very quick, very efficient. You can run and gun and do that. But then during receptions, when we're in more of a designated area, I'll typically use off-camera flashes on stands and try and switch up lighting scenarios and really use rim lighting and different fill lights and stuff like that. So I do use off-camera lighting as well. Another thing is you can't go wrong with reflectors. You can't go wrong with them, especially if you have a second shooter. You can obviously have your assistant or second shooter hold these, and they can. Reflectors can. If you have a 4-in-1, 5-in-1 reflectors, they have a diffusion panel to block sunlight, but then they also can reflect it as well if you use the silver or white side or the gold side, whichever one you want, black side. So those things are they're really big as well. Let's think here, what else? Extra batteries, preferably recharged batteries or rechargeable batteries. These things, first off, when you shoot weddings and you're a photographer in general, you run through batteries so quick. So to buy rechargeable batteries, you're saving yourself money, and you don't ever want to be in a case where your flash dies or your trigger dies, which that is another thing that I use. I use triggers. I would recommend a brand called Young Nuo. Maybe I'm saying that incorrectly, but they are a brand that is cheap, and has always been trustworthy for me. So if you're looking for triggers, that's something I would recommend. For that, I think that covers the gist of everything. If anybody has any questions, obviously feel free to message me and ask. I'll be more than happy to answer anything that anybody has as far as equipment goes. And the final thing that I wanted to talk about and that I feel is relevant is how to get involved and how to start out in the wedding industry. And I said this earlier, and I firmly believe it. You need to start out either working for family and friends and making it a casual arrangement and telling them hey, I'm just getting started. I'm not going to charge you. I just want to show up for maybe even just the ceremony, get some shots, and maybe a half hour of the reception, and I'll provide them to you for free. If they suck, you're not at a loss because you didn't pay me. So I would highly suggest working for family and friends, or if you're somebody that's a churchgoer, maybe even just talking to your priest or your pastor and just saying, hey, do you have any weddings this weekend? Would it be okay if I contact the bride and just see if she's okay, or the groom, and see if he's okay, and I can pop in and provide them with some free images just to build my portfolio. And then once you have an established portfolio, and have done a couple free wedding gigs, then I would suggest getting into second shooting and doing second shooting paid quite a number of times, if not a couple dozen times, before you start first shooting. Of course, I personally I went all out of whack with this, and like I said, the first wedding that I shot in Baltimore, I didn't even have any prior wedding experience. Like, I was fortunate enough that photographer took a chance on me, but the thing is you can't bank on that, and I wouldn't bank on that. Do it for free, start out, and then go to second shooting from there, and then obviously from that eventually expand into first shooting, and make it slow but gradual, because this is something that this is arguably, up until that point in time, you're talking about arguably the most important day of that bride and groom's life. Like, this is no joke. So I would highly suggest, like, try and play your cards right. This is no joke, and it's definitely very serious. But I know I made this pretty quick. I didn't go into anything too in depth. This was all a brief overview. But if you guys do have any questions, please contact me. I'll gladly help anybody out and give anybody pointers. I feel like I've done enough weddings at this point, probably to the tune of this is a pretty broad range, but I'd say probably 50 to 70 I've done. I think I have enough of a grasp on it that I very much think that I can help other people out, and I would love to do so. So if you guys have any questions about first shooting, second shooting, price points, how you think your gear might handle up, please let me know. I will gladly answer any questions that you guys have. But in the meantime, it's getting warm out. Get out there and shoot and have fun. And I'll talk to you guys later.